Listen closely, detectives are sitting on a mountain of secrets right now, and they are definitely zeroing in on a massive breakthrough. Building an airtight case is their only hurdle. Let me be clear up front, every single detail I share today comes straight from properly verified experts. I'm talking about federal agents, criminal profilers, and veteran cops who went entirely on the record with Fox News. We also gathered statements from CNN and NBC News alongside News Nation. I refuse to name suspects or publicly accuse anyone. This remains a highly sensitive federal case, which I respect deeply. Our discussions today explore professional profiling frameworks designed by specialists, completely avoiding any assumptions of guilt. 2 a.m. in Tucson, Arizona, with an 84-year-old lady completely alone. Nancy Guthrie's front porch camera suddenly dies at 1:47 in the morning on February 1st. This was no technical failure. The battery never died. The device was manually dismantled. An unknown figure ripped it away, letting 25 silent minutes slip by. Then a completely separate security sensor catches someone trespassing in the yard at exactly 2:12 in the morning. Forget about video clips, cloud storage, or paid accounts. All we have is an electronic heartbeat proving movement occurred at 2:12 in the morning. Exactly 16 minutes later, right around 2:28 in the morning, the old woman's heart monitor loses connection with her smartphone application. After that terrifying moment, Nancy vanished without a trace. These events present the undeniable facts of this grim mystery. However, the true focus of today's deep dive actually lies elsewhere. Trust my words if you actively follow these updates. My next massive revelation will completely shatter your current perspective regarding the nightmare unfolding on that front porch. A highly seasoned federal agent boasting 25 years of experience and 13 years running the Denver Psychological Profiling Unit recently shared a stunning hypothesis that completely ignores the killer's actual identity. Instead, it zeroes in on Nancy's final vision. Uncovering exactly what she witnessed when her entryway swung open into pitch blackness completely rewrites the fundamental nature of this tragedy. This wild concept has haunted my thoughts for several weeks now. I scoured through all available psychological profiles dropped by respected, fully verified industry professionals. My eyes practically bled analyzing that federal tape, pausing on every single frame. Today, I am laying out the evidence for victim recognition, refusing to entertain cheap gossip, or viral internet rumors, but treating this as a legitimate psychological structure built by an authority who dedicated almost 30 years to decoding these exact horrific offenses. When the screen goes to black today, the real reason behind the lack of federal arrests will finally make perfect sense, revealing their ultimate endgame, alongside the massive blind spot that Prowler missed when the situation spun out of control. Let us dive right into the deep end, kicking things off with the official video release. By February 10th, exactly 10 days deep into the hunt, Federal boss Kash Patel dropped a chilling porch video online, clearly displaying a weaponized masked intruder creeping around Nancy's doorstep. Tech wizards managed to scrape this clip directly from hidden server files, completely bypassing the missing hardware and ignoring her lack of a paid online storage plan. Federal agents essentially teamed up with Google to resurrect this digital phantom hiding deep within the company network. Let that sink into your brain for a moment. The person stealing that lens genuinely thought they destroyed the only proof. The culprit stretched out, dismantled the hardware, and likely smuggled it away or tossed it into a hidden grave that detectives never uncovered. Our phantom believed the tape vanished forever, but they miscalculated horribly. Watching the authorities pull off this incredible digital rescue, sifting through deep server trash to find a miracle, adds a massive layer of intrigue to this whole saga. Sure, the stalkers snatched the plastic shell. However, the virtual storage remained untouched and the mainframe stayed entirely secure. They completely forgot about the electronic echo left behind by the recording, sleeping quietly inside the tech giant's hidden architecture, just begging for cleared personnel and elite tech teams to drag it into the light. The contents of that restored clip instantly transformed into the most explosive clue available. Almost instantly after analysts pressed play, massive psychological warning signs began piling up higher than a skyscraper. I need to tread lightly though, mainly because this tape reveals way more than a disguised figure acting sketchy in the shadows. The video actually exposes a very distinct behavioral rhythm, serving as the ultimate master key for unlocking the horrors hidden behind those walls. The confident stroll is absolutely chilling. Literally every professional who reviewed the tape flagged this detail, immediately noting the intruder shows zero fear. Nothing, absolutely zero hesitation. Take Brianna Fox, for example. This former federal agent turned university professor easily ranks among the top minds in the profiling universe, and her breakdown of the clip is terrifying. She explicitly noted, using her exact phrasing, that the stalker essentially glides up the steps as if he owns the place. Glides. Pay attention to that description because an outsider sneaking around at midnight to commit a felony simply does not casually stroll. We are not seeing a terrified posture here, nor do we witness the jerky, panicked steps of a trespasser wandering into unknown territory. This guy never nervously checks his blind spots, and he definitely ignores the random noises echoing through the night. He refuses to hug the brickwork or hide inside the desert bushes. Instead, his stride radiates pure comfort, proving he felt perfectly safe, moving at a snail's pace while enjoying the silence, and relaxed enough to march straight toward the main entrance, completely ignoring the side fence or the backyard gate entirely. Professor Fox highlighted his complete indifference toward getting busted, which is a massive psychological red flag. Let that sink in, because random criminals always project the exact polar opposite vibe when attacking complete strangers. Unknown attackers live in constant panic about getting arrested. They stumble, they flinch wildly, and they turn into stone the second a security floodlight sparks up. Yet this guy carried an arrogant swagger. He acted totally convinced that leaving would be just as easy as arriving. Even Andrew McCabe, a former top-tier federal executive and News Network analyst who stands as a massive authority on this investigation, drew the exact same terrifying parallel on his own. McCabe clearly noted the intruder lacked any real panic or sneaky urgency. We have two heavyweights in the psychological profiling arena staring at the identical tape and arriving at a unified verdict. The killer definitely knew his surroundings, which should send shivers down your spine. A random weapon-wielding freak creeping around an 84-year-old lady's porch at 2 in the morning simply does not casually stroll if he has never been there before. Fear courses through an intruder's veins, pumping their body full of stress chemicals. They twitch, darting around in sheer panic, perfectly aware they are trespassing. You never see an unknown prowler stroll up to a pitch-black porch with the casual vibe of a weekend errand. This guy strutted up confidently. Investigator Johnny Grusing keeps circling back to one driving mystery, that bizarre lens trick. Just observe his reaction to the surveillance feed. He showed up entirely unprepared. There is no specialized jamming equipment or blinding beam in his arsenal. You will not see him pull out dark paint, a masking sack, or glare reduction tools. Ex-federal operative Josh Campbell, analyzing the situation for CNN, spotted an immediate red flag. A smart criminal who recognized the security tech as a major obstacle, they would have packed tactical gear to block the lens effectively. Occasionally, criminals are clever. History shows us cautious crooks go to great lengths to avoid dropping DNA or leaving smudged prints at a crime scene. This guy failed, so what was his brilliant backup plan? His initial move involves awkwardly slapping his covered palms straight over the glass. When that proves useless, he starts frantically scanning the area, eyes darting to the dirt. He spots the landscaping bushes nearby. Desperate, he rips off a clump of leaves from the garden and blindly mashes the foliage over the electronic eye. A literal garden weed became his SHIELD veteran federal agent Steve Moore. A regular expert on major news panels labeled the stunt intensely calculated, yet disastrously uncoordinated. The analyst took his critique a step beyond that. He confidently stated, "We are watching a complete rookie commit his very first offense." Just ponder those contrasting ideas. Thoroughly plotted out, yet chaotic in the moment. Opposing concepts merge here perfectly, describing the reality of this event. His brain understood that the security system posed a massive risk to his freedom. Yet he entirely neglected to figure out a viable workaround before stepping foot on the property. Failing to bridge the space between recognizing a threat and actually handling it proves he is far from an elite underworld operative. Instead, it highlights the exact mindset of an amateur daydreamer. He spent hours fantasizing about a heist without possessing any real-world execution experience. This is a guy who fueled his own adrenaline rehearsing the perfect break-in mentally for weeks. He simply froze and winged it the second reality pushed back. But there remains one crucial detail regarding his interaction with the recording device. It feels incredibly telling, yet constantly gets ignored by observers. The glass stayed perfectly intact, without a single scratch. He just masked it with some greenery instead of crushing the tech. The mental state behind that choice speaks volumes. Obliterating a surveillance unit screams raw fury and pure destruction. It signals a trespasser who knows they are leaving behind a chaotic war zone. Hiding the lens, however awkwardly executed, reveals an intruder's naive optimism. They assume they will escape without triggering any massive alarms. It shows an optimist convinced his scheme is still totally viable. Deep down, he felt his mission remained on track at that exact second. Christian Quinn weighed in. The former commander from a prominent Virginia law enforcement agency phrased it perfectly. He broke down the psychology during his recent interview with NBC News. The logic was completely flawed. That massive disconnect between theory and action will be absolutely crucial once we analyze the confrontation on the porch. We also have to discuss the supposedly lethal weapon. Analysts uniformly spotted another glaring red flag hidden within the tape. Dedicating significant focus to this clue is vital. It strongly supports the hypothesis that the victim actually recognized her attacker. Let us talk about the firearm. Authorities examining the clip noted the intruder gripping a small self-loading handgun, as CNN reported. Weapons specialist Stephen Gowski noted its striking similarity to the highly popular Sig Sauer P-365. That model remains a top choice for hidden self-defense across the nation. Absolutely judging strictly by the footage, the object definitely mimics the shape of a miniature or pocket-sized automatic sidearm. Granted, the blurry pixelation makes absolute certainty impossible. However, analyzing the silhouette immediately screams Sig Sauer P-365 to my trained eye. Having owned multiple versions myself, the handle shape matches flawlessly. It is wildly widespread, easily bought at large retailers, local armories, or casual neighbor swaps. However, the carrier sheath itself cracks the whole mystery wide open. Ex-federal boss Andrew McCabe chimed in, who is literally the second highest ranking intelligence chief out there. He firmly declared that any individual holding actual combat or police credentials would never strap a piece to their body in such a bizarre orientation. The rig dangled awkwardly from the front buckle area, resting entirely off-center. You literally cannot grab it quickly with your main shooting hand. It is practically useless for sudden self-protection. The clumsy placement aggressively proves this amateur lacks even a single hour of formal tactical preparation. A legitimately trained soldier or active-duty cop would absolutely mock anyone. Attempting to secure a lethal weapon in such a juvenile manner is absurd. McCabe doubled down on his intense critique. Meanwhile, retired federal supervisor Steve Moore noticed another entirely separate, deeply embarrassing technical flaw. The leather pouch totally swallowed the tiny metal frame. He called the mismatched gear utterly laughable. It was an easily hidden miniature sidearm. Perfectly sized for a casual coat pocket, it was swimming inside a massive rig meant for a heavy-duty six-shooter. The mismatched combo proves the wearer is entirely clueless. Investigator Johnny Grusing took the criticism even further. He highlighted how those bulky winter mittens would completely ruin any attempt to actually pull the trigger. Just imagine the mechanics jamming a padded finger into a tiny firing ring meant for naked skin simply will not work. Heavy fabrics completely destroy your tactile control. By trying to outsmart forensic scientists with hand coverings, the foolish intruder accidentally rendered his own supposed killing tool completely useless. Grusing eventually deduced a fascinating theory. That piece of metal was merely a theatrical toy, not a functional instrument of death. It served strictly as a psychological prop to terrify an 84-year-old victim into total submission. The terrifying illusion mattered far more than actual ballistic capability. After all, successfully intimidating a victim does not require actual bullets. Flashing a convincing piece of metal usually does the trick perfectly. If we accept the premise that the pistol was purely a bluff, we are forced to confront a much darker mystery. How did he actually plan to execute his target? Picture a pitch-black porch at 2 in the morning. What psychological weapon forced Nancy Guthrie to unbolt her deadbolt and step blindly into the night? Johnny Grusing knows the terrifying truth. The weapon was definitely not a firearm. The deadly lure was simple familiarity. Let us properly meet this man. We need to dive deep into Grusing's background since his brilliant hypothesis anchors our entire investigation. You truly need to grasp his immense credibility before we dissect the chilling discoveries he made. This veteran served 25 grueling years as an elite FBI operative out of Denver. For 13 of those years, he commanded their behavioral analysis squad, a specialized division tasked with infiltrating the dark minds of ruthless criminals. They mapped out exactly how monsters operate, unpacking their twisted logic, hidden motives, and unpredictable reactions under extreme pressure. His resume covers gruesome murders, brutal abductions, and horrific assaults, alongside long-forgotten mysteries that sat rotting away in basement storage lockers, while grieving relatives prayed for a tiny miracle. Furthermore, he penned the acclaimed true crime book Unmasking the Notorious Predator, Scott Kimball exploring absolute pure evil. That harrowing investigation proved the catastrophic danger of a monster hiding safely behind a friendly neighborhood smile. Moreover, he absolutely spearheaded one of the most monumental criminal justice triumphs of our current generation today, specifically bringing down the notorious Golden State Killer, Joseph James DeAngelo, a brutal predator who relentlessly haunted California neighborhoods for so many agonizing decades on end. This phantom hunted out in the open among unsuspecting neighbors, evading authorities for so long that countless weary detectives simply threw in the towel and completely gave up completely. But Grusing's dedicated task force refused to quit. They leveraged a groundbreaking investigative tool involving genetic genealogy to map out complex bloodlines from biological samples, hunting down their ultimate target. This finally delivered long overdue closure to shattered families everywhere. I am stressing his impeccable track record because it directly impacts our understanding of this specific mind-boggling mystery we face. That exact cutting-edge scientific method is currently analyzing the complex biological material collected directly from the victim's estate, recently shipped off to an independent testing facility down in Florida. The identical forensic breakthrough that finally resolved a seemingly impossible decades-old cold case is now aggressively targeting the shadowy figure lingering outside her home that fateful, terrifying night. Whenever this seasoned professional examines an abduction, he never relies on blind luck or cheap media stunts. Instead, he meticulously decodes human psychology and follows the hard physical facts. He analyzes body language and split-second decisions made in high-stress situations, molding those psychological observations into brilliant tactical strategies that consistently lock dangerous criminals safely behind heavy iron bars. After reviewing the grim details, the expert instantly realized the attacker faced a massive obstacle at the doorstep. Something totally derailed the initial sinister plan. What was clearly intended to be a silent surgical strike suddenly devolved into an incredibly chaotic and horrifically violent bloodbath. His ultimate conclusion points to fatal familiarity. This is the expert's terrifying hypothesis right here. Sharing his insights with a major news outlet, he proposed the disguised intruder arrived at her quiet residence during the absolute dead of night on that tragic 1st of February. The perpetrator actively hid from security lenses, though avoiding digital surveillance was hardly the main priority. The real motive involved a deeply calculated and incredibly twisted psychological manipulation tactic. The killer intentionally obscured his appearance so the unsuspecting homeowner wouldn't instantly spot a heavily disguised stranger and instinctively bolt in terror upon opening up her front door. Instead, she'd simply glimpse a vague shadow or profile a seemingly ordinary visitor with a legitimate excuse for arriving so late, buying the intruder precious seconds before pure, unfiltered panic finally kicked in. The investigator posed a brilliant, haunting question that truly demands our undivided attention right now. Consider this chilling possibility. Without any audio recordings, perhaps the assailant was relentlessly hammering on the wood or aggressively smashing the smart doorbell button to grab her immediate attention. It seems incredibly likely the predator desperately needed her to turn the knob, purposely obscuring his deeply sinister disguise to avoid triggering any immediate terrified red flags. Disoriented, she would eventually undo the locks. This is hardly mere guesswork. It remains a calculated psychological profile packed with terrifyingly precise, real-world logistical consequences for the crime. The twisted strategy totally hinged on the victim answering her bell. The intruder absolutely required her unwilling blind compliance. He completely banked on a groggy homeowner making a fatal misjudgment at 2 o'clock in the morning, unbolting her safe haven and walking straight into a waiting, deadly trap. The former agent firmly concludes she fell for the bait. She approached the entryway, turning the handle wide open. Suddenly, the meticulously crafted scheme imploded into absolute terrifying chaos. Standing inches apart under the dim glow of the entryway lights at 2 o'clock in the morning, a massive fatal glitch ruined the intruder's flawlessly executed horrible night. Perhaps the cheap disguise shifted out of place for a second. Alternatively, the harsh bulb or looming architectural shadows might have accidentally illuminated his actual identity far too clearly. Forget visual clues. The terrifying giveaway might have simply been a familiar vocal tone or incredibly distinct conversational rhythm. A subtle hand gesture, the unmistakable slope of his shoulders, or his exact physical build triggered a massive psychological realization. Our primal instincts do not actually need clear facial features to successfully pinpoint an acquaintance. The subconscious instantly processes 100 microscopic behavioral clues well before our logical thoughts ever catch up to reality. Spotting a friend often relies on completely mysterious, unspoken intuition. Scientific studies regarding interpersonal awareness repeatedly prove that subtle body language, vocal inflections, and general stance expose identities just as effectively as staring directly into their eyes. An old companion hardwires themselves into your deep sensory pathways long before your rational mind actively processes their shocking presence standing right there. You simply cannot control primitive evolutionary survival traits. The profiler insists the terrified victim's innate instincts kicked into maximum overdrive during that critical juncture. She absolutely knew the shadowy figure looming on her doormat. Simultaneously, the sinister intruder suddenly realized their meticulously organized house of cards had completely crashed down. The entire scheme completely hinged upon remaining totally faceless, but the secret was officially out. Every subsequent horrific event deviated wildly from the initial calculated script. The gruesome stains the medical device abruptly flatlining, and the dark reality of a woman vanishing completely. He pins everything on that solitary flash of fatal clarity. Frankly, this deduction is definitely not just an empty, baseless guess. It remains a rock-solid psychological blueprint forged by a veteran who recognizes the devastating signs. An attacker predictably spirals into extreme violent overdrive immediately after discovering their true face is fully exposed. A previously masterful grip on the entire situation instantly morphs into an insanely reckless survival mode frenzy. This terrifying reality holds massive consequences that completely transcend the brutal violence contained within those isolated bloody seconds. If the victim pinpointed her assailant, we are completely ruling out a random drifter. The monster lived inside her circle, a horrifying fact agents confirmed by intensely analyzing those sick extortion letters. Listen up, because Gruesing absolutely crushed the ransom debate, completely validating the prior knowledge hypothesis through an entirely fresh perspective. Extortion demands bypassed the relatives entirely, landing right in the laps of news networks. Reporters at TMZ got an elaborate crypto extortion message, while fellow newsrooms found identical threats. Yet one jarring detail immediately froze detectives cold, completely flipping this entire investigation upside down. Absolutely zero extortion messages or letters ever reached the actual relatives, which is a genuinely bizarre detail. Abducting an 84-year-old mother for cash when her child happens to be a wildly famous national broadcaster commanding massive viewership means you absolutely never deliver those extortion letters to tabloids. You message Savannah directly, contact the relatives, provide evidence the victim breathes, and open negotiations. Standard kidnapping operations strictly dictate these exact logistical steps every single time. Historical police records across the nation show financial abductions rigorously sticking to that blueprint. Yet this particular perpetrator totally shattered the mold. Guthrie formulated a blunt theory: these messages completely lack the hallmarks of authentic extortion. Instead, they mimic a totally different agenda, likely a deliberate smokescreen designed to confuse detectives and manufacture a fake reason that cleverly masks the actual goal. So assuming Cash never drove this crime, what truly sparked it? The expert cautiously suggested a private vendetta, explicitly noting his analysis relied entirely on openly available details rather than classified law enforcement intel. However, his outlined scenario felt incredibly precise: an individual harboring deep resentment toward Nancy directly, completely disregarding her famous daughter or their household's celebrity status. A profoundly private conflict, steadily festering until it became intense enough to push an armed individual onto her front porch during the darkest hours of midnight. During a press chat with the Daily Mail sheriff, Chris Nanos dropped a quote that permanently lodged in my brain, remarking, "We keep hitting a wall regarding the why here. Was cash the goal? Sure, a solitary extortion threat existed, yet was financial gain the true catalyst? Or did someone simply want payback for a past slight? Payback for a past slight." Having the Pima County boss publicly drop the word payback proves he isn't just spitballing random theories, but actively broadcasting the exact angle his detective squad currently prioritizes. That specific phrasing felt entirely intentional and calculated. Placing the commander's remarks directly beside the psychological profile drafted by Guthrie, fusing a private grudge together with the concept of vengeance, totally shatters the illusion of a sophisticated hostage plot collapsing under pressure. We are facing an incredibly intimate, laser-focused attack that makes total sense after unmasking the prowler. Enter the federal agent's firearms dealers and 18 specific identities. At this exact juncture, psychological guesswork vanishes, giving way to hardcore, verifiable police legwork. By mid-February, about 2.5 weeks deep, a local firearms dealer named Philip Martin spilled details that completely shattered the public's understanding of how authorities were tackling this mystery. As a partner at Armor Bearer Arms, his revelations to Fox News Digital finally provided concrete proof for rumors that amateur sleuths heavily suspected but desperately lacked evidence to verify. Federal authorities aren't chasing a boundless pool of ghosts, they actually hold a definitive roster. They simply requested the merchant to cross-reference his internal database against a printed document containing roughly 20 individuals hunting for anyone who might have purchased a weapon from him over the previous 12 months. The shopkeeper recalled a federal operative visiting between February 10th and 12th, bringing along a 3-page document displaying the faces and identities of about 18 to 24 distinct targets. Detectives urged the proprietor to run a thorough database sweep against that entire roster, specifically asking whether a single person pictured had acquired a pistol or rifle there recently. Staring at roughly 18 to 24 mugs, spanning 3 sheets of paper, the owner diligently typed every single surname into his digital sales ledger. 0 hits registered at the shop, yet during a chat with local broadcast reporters, the merchant revealed a crucial observation that drastically overshadows those dead-end search results. He claimed the mugshots eerily mirrored the physical traits captured on the security video, insisting this wasn't merely a passing similarity, but a striking match. Prior to searching the database, he scanned the faces and immediately realized he didn't personally recognize a single soul. Yet a thought struck him anyway. Figuring he should help out a fellow Tucson resident who endured such a terrifying abduction, specifically referring to the snatched elderly woman. He gladly searched his logs for those potential captors, only to find absolutely nothing, leaving the detective to walk out empty-handed. The shopkeeper noticed the beards and overall aesthetic of those printed suspects bore an uncanny resemblance to the shadowy intruder caught on tape. This detail speaks volumes regarding the origins of that roster and exposes the Bureau's active hypothesis, proving they aren't merely flashing random strangers at merchants. Agents compiled a highly targeted demographic of suspects boasting physical attributes perfectly aligning with the grainy security clips. Network reporter Brian Enton, a journalist securing vastly superior, continuous boots-on-the-ground access regarding this entire criminal probe compared to his media peers. Confirmed detectives canvassed several regional firearm merchants carrying identical packets, proving this was a massive, highly coordinated sweep rather than one isolated stop, while the national network later broke news detailing how another weapons dealer recalled reviewing a 3- or 4-page packet strictly featuring snapshots of younger and middle-aged adult males. Informants claimed these pictures resembled standard booking portraits, indicating individuals boasting rap sheets deeply embedded in police databases and entirely trackable by law enforcement. Detectives never deploy tactics like this to chase ghosts, nor do they operate this aggressively without a solid hypothesis or tangible clues. Nobody parades distinct portraits inside targeted shops, demanding precise answers, unless they already possess a remarkably clear vision of their intended prey. Federal operatives hold actual identities alongside mugshots while aggressively hunting down financial receipts, firmly believing the midnight prowler hides somewhere within those very pages. This naturally introduces the massive retail connection, which basically reveals exactly how detectives managed to uncover these particular faces. A popular television tabloid revealed that investigators largely built their suspect catalog by directly mining the massive sales databases maintained by a massive retail corporation. That breakthrough links straight to the most recognizable piece of evidence, the intruder's 25-liter black bag, instantly verified as an Ozark Trail hiking sack retailed strictly at one specific chain. The top cop publicly verified the detail, calling that knapsack the absolute sole piece of gear tied unequivocally to one distinct corporate supplier. Every other garment, the footwear, trousers, coat, and hand coverings were completely generic, whereas the bag originated from a solitary source boasting phenomenal customer tracking. That corporate juggernaut hoards endless purchase histories and maintains pristine interior security cameras. Swipe a card for that knapsack, and your digital footprint screams your identity to the cops. Even paying with paper bills cannot save you, because security cameras constantly record the checkout lanes, giving detectives exactly what they need to compare against that porch video. Detectives are actively partnering with store executives to chase down these very clues. We know this for an absolute fact. This massive collaboration, teaming federal agents with retail giants, requires immense patience, yet it ultimately delivers rock-solid evidence that you can take to court. Notice how the pieces interlock. The knapsack points to the superstore, which unlocks purchase histories, exposing real identities, revealing faces, and eventually targeting local firearm shops. Those firearm dealers then verify if anyone on that exact list acquired a weapon identical to the one caught on tape. This approach requires intense discipline and relentless patience. Authorities are absolutely not acting like they hit a dead end here. Instead, these deliberate moves prove detectives are carefully stacking up evidence to confirm their existing theories. Law enforcement is definitely holding their cards close to the chest. Agents already held the upper hand entering that weapons shop. They possess the same crucial insight while strategizing with retail executives. That certainty remains solid as they hauled 3 sheets of suspect portraits around various arms dealers throughout the city. Forget asking if a prosecution is brewing. The real mystery is exactly when the hammer drops. Which brings us to the genetic evidence currently sitting in a southern state. While the retail tracking and weapon shop interviews weave a compelling narrative, the biological clues form an entirely separate, devastating snare. Ultimately, both investigative paths collide at one undeniable truth. Detectives recovered genetic traces at the victim's residence completely unrelated to her or her loved ones. Relatives are entirely off the hook. Her kin eagerly provided cheek swabs to authorities, effectively wiping away any lingering suspicion against them. Unidentified biological material grabbed from the bloody entryway where the victim bled went straight to an independent testing facility down south. The local sheriff openly admitted the samples are blended. Pinning down an exact profile gets tricky, since genetic traces often tangle together. Because multiple people contributed to this specific biological soup, technicians must carefully isolate the distinct cellular markers. Such complexity ruins quick hits in the federal system. However, standard registries aren't the only tool left today. Just listen to leading genetic specialist Cece Moore, who is no mere talking head. This woman literally invented modern forensic ancestry tracking across America, directly helping authorities nail down over 1,000 suspects in unsolved mysteries. During her NBC News interview, she stated clearly, "If I were the abductor, panic would be setting in right about now, because modern ancestral tracing guarantees his unmasking." Any smart perpetrator should feel terrified, as cutting-edge biological tracking promises absolute ruin. Her confidence was absolute. There is zero doubt about the ultimate outcome. Breaking down the clock, she noted that domestic family ties mean public ancestry websites can unmask a villain in mere moments or a few hours tops. Generational depth on American soil creates endless digital footprints online, allowing forensic algorithms to construct an accurate family web at lightning speed. Federal agents deployed this exact science to finally capture the most notorious serial offender in California history. That monster spent decades feeling invincible until his own cellular material betrayed him, guiding police right to his living room. Science ignores your meticulous cover-ups. Cellular truth shrugs at the passage of time. Your false sense of security means absolutely nothing to a microscope. The moment any distant cousin spits into an ancestry tube, your days of hiding are permanently over. A retired federal intelligence chief recently broke down the exact scientific strategy on national television. Detectives successfully scrubbed the profiles of every single person who actually belonged near that crime scene. That isolated rogue sample left behind acts as a genetic breadcrumb. Even without a federal database match, specialists can reverse engineer an entire bloodline to pinpoint one exact person. Behavioral profiling suggests the victim recognized her attacker, while the laboratory works tirelessly to put a name to that face. We aren't looking at two separate paths anymore. Everything is crashing into a single focal point. You have the retail shopping suspects combined with those visual profiles that are being shopped around local armories. Add in the biological evidence sitting down south and the psychological profile indicating a familiar face. Literally every single clue drags authorities back to a very specific social circle. One seasoned investigator, a guy who understands exactly how the net tightens around a culprit, confidently claims the fog is finally lifting. Let's break down this psychological profile. Before tackling the ultimate mystery that has been looming over this entire breakdown, we desperately need to review the attacker's mindset again, simply because the evidence holds vastly more weight than even the sharpest armchair detectives realize. Examining the intruder's actions reveals a crystal clear narrative of his initial expectations versus the actual disaster. The man strolled up the walkway without a single care about visibility. You only strut like that when you feel absolutely certain the homeowner will gladly twist the deadbolt for you at such an odd hour. This wasn't some random prowler, it was a familiar guest. Furthermore, the guy completely lacked any high-tech gear to bypass the security lens. Hiding behind a bush was a total amateur move. It proves he memorized a script, but completely failed to account for real-world security measures. This wasn't a battle-tested professional operation. The attacker lived in a fantasy world totally lacking street smarts. He wielded what looked like a fake pistol, held at a totally bizarre angle, stuffed inside the wrong size sheath, making it practically useless in his clumsy, print-blocking winter mittens. That firearm was never meant for combat. It functioned merely as a theatrical prop. The goal was pure intimidation rather than actual lethal force. Such tactics belong to a suspect expecting a calm negotiation, completely avoiding physical warfare. Yet the crimson stains outside scream that chaos erupted regardless. Zero struggle occurred indoors. The entire brutal clash happened completely exposed on the steps, caught squarely between the home and the public road. The county sheriff verified that genetic testing matched the fluid splattered across the concrete entryway. That exact location hosted the scuffle. The master plan entirely unraveled outside. Stack the psychological profiling right alongside the gruesome biological facts, the suspect's bizarre movements, and the fake pistol theory, and the truth suddenly shines through. We are looking at a deeply flawed scheme that imploded the very second the victim's survival instincts violently kicked in to save her life. The complete radio silence from investigators' ex-FBI supervisor Lance Leing gave CBS Evening News a chilling explanation back in March. I desperately want to believe, just as her loved ones surely do, that this quiet means they caught a scent. They merely need more time to dig deeper. We are extremely optimistic that this quiet means they found a solid lead. The team simply must push harder. Maureen O'Connell, a former federal agent bringing some of the most razor-sharp insights to this entire baffling investigation, dropped a bombshell during her time on the Megyn Kelly broadcast that has been echoing in my mind ever since. She noted the authorities hold more puzzle pieces than we do, and they are definitely tracking a solid lead. They are chasing a massive breakthrough. Building the actual case is likely their biggest hurdle right now. These detectives possess facts we lack, and they smell blood in the water. They are onto a major development. Getting it to stick in court might be the real nightmare. Nailing down the concrete proof. The struggle isn't finding the evidence, it isn't identifying the culprit. The true hurdle is legally proving it. That matters immensely. That massive legal gap is exactly where this manhunt currently sits. It is the core dilemma detectives keep revisiting. So who in Nancy Guthrie's circle perfectly matches every single psychological trait? The familiarity angle demands a suspect she would willingly let inside. This rules out random drifters or shadowy gunmen roaming the streets. A person whose arrival at 2 in the morning, however odd it felt, made enough sense to unlock the deadbolt instead of dialing 911 right away. A face her subconscious immediately trusted before any survival instincts kicked in. This was an individual whose voice or posture screamed familiar long before it ever screamed lethal threat. The vendetta hypothesis points squarely at an emotional driver rather than a cash grab. Grusing made this crystal clear. The bizarre extortion letter details completely destroy the robbery angle, pointing instead to a deeply private grudge, targeting Nancy. A simmering rage intense enough to push this culprit over the edge. Furthermore, the psychological sketch clearly indicates an absolute first-time offender. Slapping tape on the lens, the awkward holster, the dummy weapon, the sloppy entry. This is definitively not a seasoned thug. This culprit clearly lacks the polish of a contract killer. Ex-federal operative Steve Moore spelled it out perfectly. This attacker was completely green to this level of violence. That implies an everyday citizen, a working professional whose identity sits quietly in a system bleeding digital breadcrumbs. The lineup of potential suspects federal agents pulled together, those 18 to 24 headshots spread across 3 sheets, paraded through weapon shops everywhere in Tucson, came directly from shopping receipts, from retail histories, from the mundane credit card swipes of a regular citizen right until they snapped. You simply do not hunt underworld assassins using civilian shopping habits. That approach targets everyday locals entrenched in a very particular neighborhood, deeply tied to a highly specific social web, possessing an undeniable, clearly traceable link to the exact items recovered from the bloody crime scene. Retired federal agent Stephen Rogers tackled this exact puzzle for TV. Insider, in his brutal honesty, perfectly captures the core theory driving this manhunt. He explained, "I would bet heavy money that an individual acquainted with Guthrie or somehow intertwined in her personal affairs, like a local handyman nurse or landscaper, played a critical role here. Someone from that service crew might have been bribed to leak alarm codes or daily routines. Alternatively, the actual mastermind might have embedded themselves in one of those mundane gigs specifically to gather that sensitive intelligence. A familiar face, a shadow lingering right on the very edges of her normal everyday existence. An observer who mapped her daily habits, flawlessly pinpointing the exact moments she would be completely isolated indoors. A prowler intimate with the floor plan. A twisted soul harboring a burning justification, however delusional it was to unleash that level of calculated horror." Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confidently told NBC News back in March, "From the jump we held firm theories about this tragedy, and our conviction has not wavered. Period. We are convinced we understand the exact motive, and we have always treated this as a calculated hit. These are concrete theories, not flimsy guesses. These are rock-solid convictions forged through weeks of relentless digging that have remained utterly unshaken." But his next statement is the absolute kicker you need to internalize. He declared, "We are confident we uncovered his motive, and we are certain she was the intended mark." The cops have a motive. They recognize the precise targeting. Combining an identified grudge with a chosen mark shrinks the suspect list exponentially. You simply cannot stalk an utter stranger. A deep-seated vendetta requires a pre-existing connection, pure and simple. The sheriff's exact phrasing perfectly mirrors the psychological blueprint that Guthrie painstakingly drafted. This blood was spilled personally. Federal agents hold a tight list of suspects. They are processing genetic markers down in Florida. They possess retail receipts and weapon shop inquiries citywide. They are relying on a psychological matrix engineered by the exact same brilliant mind who recently cracked one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in modern American history. They boast a local sheriff openly bragging about deciphering the exact motive, insisting his evidence has only grown stronger. Johnny Guthrie analyzed every grim detail: the arrogant swagger, the fake pistol, the taped-up security lens, the crimson stains ruining the front steps, the undelivered extortion letters, the glaring indicators of a deeply personal vendetta. After reviewing it all, he concluded, no matter what went down on that porch, Nancy absolutely knew her killer. This is far from a baseless theory. It is a meticulous profile forged from hard facts by a veteran profiler who rarely misses the mark. The feds aren't slapping cuffs on anyone today. Not just yet. They are quietly fortifying their case, systematically eliminating the gap between what they suspect and what a jury will convict on. The real mystery isn't whether they have identified the monster. The real question is exactly when they decide to drop the hammer publicly. Given everything uncovered over the past 8 weeks, that explosive moment might be arriving far sooner than we think. We deal in hard truths, not cheap gossip. Anyone following us from episode 1 knows our golden rule. We absolutely refuse to name unverified suspects. Turning local whispers into concrete evidence just isn't our style. Everything you hear today is pulled straight from the official files at Fox News Digital. We also rely on CNN, NBC News, Men's Journal, TV Insider, Parade, News Nation, alongside official statements from credentialed detectives and psychological profilers deeply involved. We verify every single quotation, identify our sources, and vet our professionals. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie vanished on February 1st. She urgently requires her daily prescriptions, while her desperate loved ones have tirelessly searched for her without resting for a single moment. Savannah Guthrie stepped completely away from her longtime anchor desk at the Today Show, dedicating all her energy to the fierce battle to locate her mom. Annie, her sister, remains relentlessly involved. The whole household continues showing tremendous open and steadfast support. Outside Nancy's Tucson residence, neighbors continue building a massive memorial filled with glowing candles, fresh bouquets, and heartfelt letters. Complete strangers are constantly sending up prayers for her safe arrival. The President of the United States and cops across all jurisdictions are watching closely, while Sheriff Nanos confirmed that a dedicated task force remains entirely focused on cracking this intense mystery. Should you possess even the tiniest clue regarding this situation, please reach out immediately by dialing 1-800-CALL-FBI. Federal agents will pay up to $100,000 for solid tips resulting in Nancy's rescue or the capture of those responsible. Her relatives added an independent bounty reaching $1 million for crucial details bringing Nancy back. A person out in the world holds the key. A specific individual hides the truth. A witness definitely spotted a loved one acting strange right past February 1st. A bystander definitely caught an unusual suspicious detail. A quiet observer is clutching a random fact, second-guessing its importance. Believe us, it counts. Pick up the phone. We promise to track every single twist in this ongoing nightmare. Expect us to deliver fully vetted breakthroughs, expert breakdowns, and freshly released clues immediately. The Guthries desperately need closure, and the Tucson area holds those secrets. Our pursuit never stops until Nancy finally walks through her front door. In a world filled with noise, one truth still rises above everything else. Evil often depends on silence, fear, and the belief that no one is watching. But this story reminds us that truth has a voice, and sooner or later, it will be heard. What happened to Nancy is heartbreaking. An elderly woman alone in the quiet of night became the center of a tragedy no one should ever face. Yet beyond the fear, there is a lesson society must never ignore. Every human life matters, especially the lives of the vulnerable. The elderly are not invisible. They are not forgotten. They deserve protection, dignity, and care. This story also teaches us the power of persistence. Even when evidence seemed lost, patient minds and determined hearts kept searching. That is what justice demands, not rumor, not reckless accusation, but truth built carefully, respectfully, and courageously. We must learn to be more alert, more compassionate, and more responsible for one another. A safe community is not built by technology alone, but by human concern. When we choose empathy over indifference and vigilance over neglect, we honor those who can no longer speak for themselves. And that may be the most powerful justice of all,